Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 12th, and welcome to the Tiger Club of Kansas City Zoom call. Our guest today is the award-winning columnist from the Kansas City Star, Vahe Gregorian. He's been a frequent visitor to our club in the past and always has great insights. Before we start, as always, I'd like to thank Darren Weidick for orchestrating our Zoom call, Paul Blackman and Barry Canner for lining up our excellent series of speakers. If you're watching live, you already are a member of the club for this fiscal year. If you are watching on the YouTube tape, please go on to our website at kctigerclub.com and pay the $50 dues. Remember, we need the help fund the club and fund our annual donation to the Tiger Scholarship Fund. Also, membership will allow you to watch these calls live. And we have coming up in the next couple of weeks, both Missouri basketball coaches, Conzo Martin on October 19th and Robin Pinchton on October 26th. Today, we turn to Vahe Gregorian from the Kansas City Star. Vahe, welcome as always. We look forward to hear what you have to say today.
Well, always glad to be with you guys. And if we need a little amplification of anything I'm saying, I've got two golden retrievers up here with me in the office that may pipe up at any time.
That's all right. We all understand. A lot of talk about vaccines in the world today, and I think in the state of Missouri, we need a vaccine for bad defense because it is endemic to both the Tigers and the Chiefs. Let's start with Mizzou. Tigers did pull off homecoming win against North Texas the other day. It's been a bit of an up and down season. Again, most of the woes on the defensive side of the ball. What do you look at the current state of Mizzou football right now?
Well, I think, first of all, just in a sense of context, I think we thought they'd be a little farther along this season. I think it's also easy to forget it's early in the second season of a kind of time warp tenure of a coach taking over in the middle of a pandemic. So we're still getting to know him and getting to know his approach. I think we can all see that he's bright and charismatic, not afraid to be decisive, obviously, with making a decision to change a defensive line coach a couple games into the season. What we don't know, I think, is obvious. We don't really understand the full capacity of what his coaching acumen will be, right? We just don't know. We know he's a good recruiter. So it's a little flat right now. And I think probably a lot of people gritting their teeth, thinking about what to expect with a team that just beat Alabama coming to town. On the other hand, I'm a pretty firm believer that every game is its own thing. I don't know that I think Missouri would win Saturday, but I don't assume a wipeout either. I just think there's a lot of emotional ups and downs in college football, and A&M could be a little, I don't know, not deflated by that loss, but sometimes a team sags a little by that win after a huge win like that. So, that's all. The last part of it, though, Mark, that I'd add is just somebody told me this a long time ago, and it's really true that, especially in football, you don't really know what you've got in a coach for 4 or 5 years and a couple recruiting cycles. Now, barring something going wrong, like conflict in the athletic department or, something that's really demonstrating, ineptitude or breaking of rules and such, I don't see any reason why coaches shouldn't get that period of time if you think highly of them enough to hire them. So I'm not saying that to say, anybody should be frustrated with the situation exactly. I just mean that it's going to take time to really understand what they've got going. And I think there are plenty of promising signs. It's just some issues to contend with.
And I would agree in the second season, especially with last year, as weird as it was, we have to maybe put the brakes on our evaluations. I watched a good part of the A&M Alabama game, of course, a great win for the Aggies. And we talked with Gary Barnett a few weeks ago. There has been a proliferation of upsets throughout the first few weeks of this season. I think more FCS teams have beaten FBS teams in this season than ever before. I got to think A&M's going to have a little bit of as you put it, maybe just down after such an emotional win. And, maybe this is the week the Tigers turn it around.
Yeah, it's just hard to tell that. One thing I lean on when I think of something like that is both ancient history and pretty removed, but it is actually a personal experience. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Big Penn Quakers win of 1982, but it was monumental in our lives. A huge victory over the hated Harvard Crimson to secure a part of the Ivy League title with one game remaining in the season. And this was a very emotional game. It came down to a last second field goal that missed, and then there was a penalty and another kick, and it was the biggest win there for 35, 40 years. And then a week later, nothing in the tank, and lost that game. And it was 100% about not managing the emotions after that. And really, it's obviously just a moment in time, and it not exactly correlated to this, but it does always make me think like, okay, it's one thing to understand how to handle defeat, but it's also another thing to understand how to handle victory. And sometimes those things, change the dynamics of a game. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. And like I said, I've long since, I guess we're forced to predict things sometimes, but I've long since stopped thinking that that's really a winning proposition. Kind of like to see the games unfold.
I'll never forget that Penn Harvard game of 1982. But I do, as one of the older people on this call, I will remember 1972, Missouri lost to Nebraska 62-0, then went to South Bend to face an defeated Notre Dame team. And the comment in the South Bend paper was that the temperature and the point spread would be in the 50s. And the Tigers pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the Al Onofrio era. I think it was 30-26. So it can happen.
Yeah, no doubt things can flip. One last thing about Harvard. I hope there's no Harvard law grads on here.
Oh, we have tons of them on this call.
But as we used to say in Philadelphia, you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him much.
All right, well, let's move on past the Ivy League. Let's talk
Ivy League football.
Let's talk a little about the Chiefs. I'm just scratching my head. What has happened? They just seem flat. I was looking at some NFL statistics. They are last in points allowed. They have turned the ball over as much. I think the only other team equals them is the powerful Jacksonville Jaguars. They just are off their game, and you cover them a lot. I know you don't get to go in the locker room because of the pandemic, but what is the feel you get for this team?
I don't know, but I feel like all my instrumentation has been kind of just spinning wildly because it's really hard to really understand what's going on here. I mean, if you didn't know this team had been to back-to-back Super Bowls, and have some context of what they're capable of, you'd say, well, looks like they're intriguing. They might have some good players. They'll win a few more games. But you would have to be focused on the unbelievable turnover ratio. I mean, that's where they're in the conversation with the Jaguars. And it's been, I think, 11 straight turnovers the Chiefs have committed without getting a takeaway, and 10 turnovers in their 3 losses. And we keep thinking about this stuff. Oh, well, those are uncharacteristic things. Well, they're not uncharacteristic of the 2021 Chiefs. And we've heard a lot of emphasis on things that, they know that they need to fix, that takes this, takes that, better communication, protect the ball, et cetera, be on the same page offensively with Patrick and his receivers. And those things are still happening. Sometimes we do see in football, this really can be true. And I think we need to remember this as we try to just keep a little balance on what to look at in this team. Sometimes things happen in bursts and happen in weird ways that just really are fluky. Tyreek Hill is an amazing receiver. And then that ball just goes off his hands for a pick six the other day. I don't know that the Chiefs would win the game without that, but it's going to be more meaningful at the end if that hadn't happened. I think a ball went off his face mask down near the end zone in the first quarter.
That's correct.
So things of that nature are really weird. The thing I think is most puzzling, the offense had not a great game at all the other day, but the offense actually has been pretty productive. High percentage of scoring on its drives and all that. But the defense, I really don't get it. I mean, we're talking about 2/3 to 3/4 of the same guys back that have been in the top 10 in points allowed the last two seasons. And we constantly are hearing about communication breakdowns with guys that have played together for a long time. Now, I know it only takes a player or two in there to change the, sort of overall dynamics and things like that, but they look a step slow and a couple yards away from where they're supposed to be kind of all the time. And obviously, we probably don't even, he who shall not be mentioned almost in terms of getting burned on a couple of those plays the other day, number 49. But that's just baffling to me. So the other thing that I've been thinking about, I mean, Steve Spagnuolo does have a nice track record of making defenses better as the season goes along. But the most prominent examples of those are in his first seasons at places. He really did a great job his first season with the Giants. They were horrendous the first month of the season, that defense. And by the end, they were acclaimed as having one of the best game plans for a Super Bowl ever. That's the team that beat the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. And it's not hard for us to remember 2 years ago when he came in as the first-year defensive coordinator with the Chiefs, and they were not much better for about 10 weeks. And again, they became, I think, a significant asset in the 9-game winning streak that ended that season to win the Super Bowl. But I bring that up. Okay, that's great that he's had that track record, but those instances were things that you would have reason to see. Well, of course, it's going to take a little while. If you're good at your job, it still might take a little while. You've got new schemes, new players, new personalities, new coaches. But now we're in the third year of this situation, and I just don't get it. It's easy to say that, oh well, they haven't had a full lineup, haven't been fully healthy, but it's been a guy or two each game, and that can make a difference. But every team deals with that. And it just is puzzling to me, and thus I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know how to feel about that. There was a graphic, NBC ran this graphic, and I didn't get to confirm it, but I think the 5 straight games of 29 or more points was an NFL record. It might have been just to start the season, but it might have been a record period. That's not what you want.
I was out to dinner with my wife last night, and there was a TV on to the NFL Network, and the stat, I saw it, and it was a little ways away, and my eyes aren't very good, but I think it said the Chiefs have allowed the highest yards per play since the Baltimore Colts of 1950. I mean, the Bills really were very efficient the other night. They didn't run a lot of plays. Their yards per play was huge.
It was, and there was a first half statistic about Josh Allen, and I don't know if it went back to 1950, but it was a good few decades about the yards per completion since anybody had done that. And that's the thing, right? It's okay. You can take a little consolation in. They forced 3 straight punts, for instance, at the start of the second half, and before that, they'd gone almost 2 full hours of football since forcing a punt over a course of a couple of games. they've made some red zone stops. Okay, after 11 straight touchdowns they allowed, so that it kind of warps what you're looking for when you're seeking consolation in those things. If it's that things have been so bad. On the other hand, this is true, and this is something that I think about all the time, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying, how even on one side of the field, you can have one or two things go wrong and it looks like a total disaster. It's also true that football, we all know this, is very much a complementary game. And if the defenses, let's say the defense had played like it did in the second half, in the first half, Chiefs wouldn't be in the hole they were in. The offense probably wouldn't, maybe arguably have pressed. By the time they came out in the second half, it looked like what the Chiefs used to do to other teams was happening to the Chiefs. That there used to be a sense that you could start to see the panic on the other team as soon as Mahomes started into a little bit of a comeback, right? They're down 10 points or 12 points, and you could feel it coming. Now it feels like the Chiefs are don't know if they can get there, and maybe they do some things that they wouldn't normally do, and next thing you know, here's a pick six. I mean, part of this I need to say too is that we want to have a sort of idea of some logical explanation for all of it, and some of it's just random football, right? I mean, it's just how things happen.
Yeah, they've won 5 straight division titles, so I guess there is a regression to the mean. This question's a bit of a stretch regarding that, and I just want your thoughts. It seems to me that ever since the Brett Reed incident, that the Chiefs have been off kilter. Is that a fair comment?
Well, if you base it purely on the record and how they've looked, you wouldn't say they've looked good in any game since then. I mean, they've prevailed a couple times, but they could easily have lost the opener to the Browns. The score looks a little different than this, and they did pull away from the Eagles, but that was a little unsightly for a while. And obviously the Super Bowl was bad. So they've lost 4 of 6 since that happened, right? And you wouldn't say you thought they had any kind of performance that was dominant, or even really that felt like you felt assured of where it was going by halftime. On the other hand, we need to remember that I don't have this number right in front of me, but it's been a while since they've really run away from teams. I mean, they had a lot of wins last year. Remember, they were 14-1 last year in games Patrick started, and I think eight of those were by 6 points or fewer. I might have that number a little bit off, but they were close games. There were a lot of close games. So I think I'm not sure I can make that parallel, Mark, but I do think that one way or another we can see that the margin for error has been greatly reduced just over the last year. Even when you thought of them as the team to beat, the margin for error has been greatly reduced. Now we see some pretty capable young quarterbacks. I know Josh Allen's stats were maybe not what they'd been coming into the game, but tell you what, didn't he look like a great quarterback in that game? Baker Mayfield and Justin Herbert. I mean, there's some guys that can play, and so I think we understand that use the term earlier, regress to the mean, or I can't remember how you phrased that, Mark, but I think Chiefs have been an outlier because they've been so exceptional, and at some point, things come together to sort of bring things back to earth, whether it's something within them or just the fact that the rest of the league's trying too, and they have good players also, and coaches that stay up all night trying to figure out how to stop this team. And so now it'll be interesting to see how the counterbalance goes, or how the pendulum swings back for the Chiefs. I mean, it's a different world for them now, and a different set of challenges to see what they do with this now that they're, I would submit, not just another team, but they're certainly in the back of the pack and having to reassert themselves.
Well, an optimistic note, their opponents have a combined record, I think, of 17-8. And in 2019, when they won the Super Bowl, they did lose 4 of 6 during the middle of the season. So they can get it turned around, but just haven't seen any indication that they're going to especially on defense.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do think, I mean, look, they've played at least three teams that sure seem like they're playoff teams. At 4 really. And so I guess that's something. On the other hand, might make you worried about the playoffs if those teams you're playing and not beating. But look, I do really think this is true. So much of what's happened since Patrick arrived has made us feel like not just enjoying the moment, but look at the future. He's so young and this and that. And as they get ready to play Washington, where the football coach used to say the future is now, I think that's how they have to see it. I mean, they got to find a way to just be here and not think about anything else, but playing the team they're playing. And I don't know that they've been different than that or not, but they're clearly not dialed in the way you'd want them to be. And just as I said, I don't assume Missouri will get blown out by A&M. I don't assume the Chiefs will win in Washington. I think they will, but they're kind of at a reset moment, I think.
Talking to Vahe Gregorian of the Kansas City Star. If you'd like to ask him a question, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will fire questions at him here in just a few minutes when we get through our discussion. Vahe, I want to talk to you about the Royals. I do see room for optimism for them as they finish the season, but I want to get your thoughts on the potential for a downtown stadium and what do you think the reality of that will happen?
Well, I do think, I feel like that's inevitable. Hang on one second. It's also inevitable that my wife is coming up here to say goodbye. Okay. Bye, hon.
Goodbye.
Have a good day. I do feel like it's inevitable. And I think that, I also understand that it's objectionable to some people, and I can see both sides of that. We've been talking about this a little bit internally, just trying to think through all the elements of it. And one of the things that certainly is true is that Kauffman Stadium is a beloved place. And it's still a great place to go for baseball. I love going there. And I think some of those who don't want to see this change are quite conscious of that. I think there's other issues to think about, whether it's how does the downtown footprint absorb this? Can it really be something that's win-win for stimulating growth downtown? How will it be funded? I'm sure is on people's minds. So there's all kinds of question marks about it, but I do think we've seen plenty of examples. I'd say probably overwhelming set of examples that these things do change the landscape for the better downtown. And we've got, I don't know how it would be built if it comes to that, but I think we've got some pretty world-class architectural firms here that I would think would be part of this. And I think this is important too. I think John Sherman, obviously he's a businessman, but I also think John Sherman's track record is someone who's very invested in the community and understands that this needs to be a civic enterprise as well as a business enterprise. So I do believe there's a lot of momentum for it happening. And I'll be at this point surprised if it doesn't happen. And I'm certainly of the mind that it could be before that lease expires. I think that if it gathers, since it's been made public, and if it gathers momentum or they can build the consensus they're seeking to, I would think it would be, sooner than later.
When we get to questions just a minute, Vahe, if you don't mind, before we do, I wanted to ask you, since we saw you last time, your father Vartan passed away in April. His biography is amazing. He was head of 2 Ivy League universities, I believe. He saved the New York Public Library. He established a fund that raised millions to help African students get educated. Your thoughts on your dad?
Well, I'm grateful you asked, and I'll tell you, it was a surprise. It was a surprise when it happened. Even though he was 87, he had been in good health and still working full time. So it was quite jarring. But I also can say that thanks to really just wonderful outpouring from friends and a lot of tributes to him, that it was pretty easy to shift into gratitude mode pretty fast, and we have felt a lot of that. And it's kind of funny with my dad. I mean, I'm probably an unlikely sports writer. I mean, here he is. He comes from the Middle East to go to college here, and academia is his thing. And we may have bumped heads here and there about my own emphasis on academia versus sports and things like that. But over the years, I came to realize how much he enjoyed that I'd found what I found to be fulfilling. And it's funny, I just noticed over my shoulder, I didn't really put it there for product placement, but there's a little High Hopes placard back there. That's the book I did with Gary Barnett, and you'd mentioned that earlier. I mentioned Gary earlier. And just one last thing about this: when I did the book, it was at a time where my dad came out. I was living in St. Louis at the time, and there were excerpts of it in the Chicago Tribune, and I was doing radio interviews for it while he was there, and then we were driving back across the country together. And I remember thinking, it felt like it just felt like he was proud of me finding my way. So more than you probably wanted to hear, but I thank you for asking, and we're grateful for everybody's support.
Would you write a book about his life? Because it is a compelling story.
It's funny you say that. I have thought about that. I have somewhere in here, I've got boxes of notes and everything from his life in one box. And I've also got boxes of notes on a project I thought I'd work on about the history of sportsmanship. Maybe at least one of those will get worked on directly sometime. It's fun to think about.
Well, I think you should do it. I read a story I've in the archives from 2013. I think Dan Caesar wrote it, where when you were coming to Kansas City, and you said that you were the black sheep of the family because you were a sports writer.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like that, mostly playfully. My parents never made me feel like that, but I kind of wondered.
That was great. You ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right. First of all, why is this isn't your responsibility or department, but why is there no longer the ability to write or post a comment on the digital version of the Star?
I didn't know that there was or wasn't that opportunity. And so I'm sorry to say I don't know why that would be. But I do think I should take this moment to ask: is that, when you say the digital version, I wonder if that includes the new initiative for the morning sports edition? I guess that wouldn't allow for it, now that I think of it as I say this out loud, because that's really a copy. It's really a PDF, basically, right, or a copy of the way the article would look in the paper. By the way, and I know nobody's more of a technophobe than me, and maybe some of you guys feel that way, but I wouldn't suggest looking at this if I didn't really think it was pretty cool. But if you get a chance, do, and if you subscribe, and I think you can get to it even without a subscription. I might be wrong about that, but this new morning sports edition, expanded sports edition, it's not like you can hold it. I want to hold the paper. I get that. It's still, those of us of a certain age want that. But if you click on it, you'll see it's beautiful presentation, and it's up to date, through late the night before. For instance, all the Chiefs coverage we had in the newspaper today was in the morning edition Monday, that is presented really well and looks much like it would have back in the glory days when we had a lot more money coming in and thus more print to be able to use. Just take a peek if you get a chance. I think you might find it pleasing.
I think the comment section was on the online, not the E-Star. And
I'm sure that, I'm sure that's
Yeah.
true. There wouldn't be any way to engage this on the E-Star. I'm not just trying to divert, but
No, I understand.
I thought that was an opportunity to mention that. I don't know why that would be. I suppose I could hazard a guess that maybe there's not enough people to monitor that properly. I don't know. I'm just making that up. I really don't know.
This next one is not a question, but a comment. In his news conference, Eli Drinkwitz said, "Football will humble you," says there's other teams within the state right now who are not playing the way they want to be playing either. I guess we know who he's referring to.
That's, you know what? I mean, he's got a sense of humor, no doubt about it. Sometimes it can come off a little snarky but I think what it says is, he doesn't feel like he needs to mince words and does what he feels he needs to do to make points about both public perception and try to reach his team. Our friend Dave Matter, friend of the Tiger Club, friend to me, and longtime colleague / rival, theoretically, asked Eli a great question a couple of weeks ago, and he phrased it as, on one hand, Eli's preaching patience. On the other hand, he's preaching urgency. And of course, those are for two different audiences in a lot of ways. But I do think it must be very hard to be the guy having to tell two different very important constituencies that each of those messages is important and matters. I mean, because he obviously has to have conviction about asking for patience, and he has to have be all in on the idea that he needs the urgency and buy-in from his team every day. And so hopefully there's a place where both those just kind of come together.
Next question's about the Royals. Were you surprised they re-signed Michael Taylor? And what do you think the starting lineup will look like in 2022? And who would be the opening day starter? So several questions there about.
I was surprised about Michael Taylor a little bit. And I suppose the message is that, if you own center field, that's a nice building block. While I don't know how much longer he'll be here, if it's beyond that or anything like that. But I thought they might be thinking more in terms of moving around some other chess pieces out there. But if that's going to happen, at least it'll happen with knowing center field is being patrolled well, with a guy who, certainly has his moments at the plate. I think the bigger question that comes out of that to me is if I'm going to go out on a limb and assume Bobby Witt Jr. will start the year with the Royals. I think that's fairly safe to believe, but maybe not 100%. Where I can't go out on a limb, of course, is with any prediction of Mondesi's health. But if he's healthy, then I'm sure he would start the season with the Royals. And now you've got Nicky Lopez pretty entrenched as a really good shortstop who hit 300. Mm-hmm. And I think right now, I mean, maybe there's days Nicky Lopez could play second base, but then you got the whole question of Whit Merrifield. They ended up, becoming a fairly good combo there. So now you're talking about who's at third base, and Dayton Morris said this to me in the past. Part of what they hope is the pillar of the future is maximizing the amount of time Sal Perez can be on the field with Mondesi and Bobby Witt Jr. That's sort of what they envision as the makings of a great team. Now, again, there's the X factor of Mondesi's health, but but the point is, if you got Mondesi healthy and you got Bobby Witt, they're on the field somewhere. And I think it's a really interesting question about whether one of them could be considered a possibility in the outfield.
And opening day starter, any guess?
Not really. I feel like I would guess if I felt like I had a really strong hunch, but I think the thing that's interesting about them is I feel like there's, 7, 8, 9 arms that should melt down into a nice starting rotation to start the season. But there's some volatility there in some of the younger guys. Obviously, and Brad Keller wasn't what we expected this season, and injuries have been a factor. I would bet that the Royals wouldn't even know themselves right now what they would have a hunch is the guy. I think there's going to be a lot of wait and see in that. The good news is I think that there's the core of a really good staff there. I'd like to see, this is sort of a side point, but I'd like to see Brady Singer take some more steps pretty soon. I've been surprised he hasn't done better than he has so far, but it's also been a weird time in the game for everybody.
Back to the Chiefs. TV people have been talking about the defenses using a deep cover 2 against the Chiefs. Is there a way to adapt to the change in defensive strategy? And I'll just add, it seems teams are trying to prolong Chiefs drives and just give up the underneath stuff and keep the long plays in check. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, it probably is. I'm just trying to picture myself being in a defensive staff room, and I'd be telling myself, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're not letting Tyreek Hill run by us. And then we're going to figure out how to put multiple guys on Kelsey. And then everything else goes from there. I think, I can't remember which game it was now. Maybe the Baltimore game. The Chiefs were really smooth at just taking what they got. They just stayed underneath and happy to milk some clock and dissect the other defense that way. And I think, I don't think it's as simple as that though, because I think Buffalo's defense was really good against the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs were trying to just take what they could get and couldn't even do that. Couldn't really establish the running game the way they had. And so all those things go together. The other thing Patrick said after the game that was kind of interesting, naturally, we know there's a lot of exotic defenses or certainly disguised defenses, things that other teams want to try to do to confuse him or confuse the receivers. And Patrick alluded to seeing some looks they hadn't seen before. And what happens with that is it's a double challenge. If you are seeing a defense, you're not sure what it is, haven't really seen it laid out that way before, then you've got the issue of whether the quarterback and the receivers are reading the defense the same way, and thus differences of angles and depth, and even what seems to be an ongoing problem of just Patrick being on the same page with McCole Hardman, for instance. I feel like there was a play, I don't know if you remember this play, but Patrick threw, wasn't in the corner of the end zone, but threw a sort of a corner route right when Tyreek Hill had broken into the post. And that doesn't happen often with Patrick and Tyreek. It does happen with Patrick and some other guys. And there was also a very strange misfire to Travis Kelce early, where, again, it looked like Patrick might have thought it was a different angle. And a lot of times I think it's easy to forget that one of the reasons that happens isn't that the guy doesn't know the play. It's that they're trying to, couple things, they're trying to read the defense the same way, but also as we know, the adaptive riffing of Patrick, some of that is stuff that's rehearsed to a degree, like they are on the same page with how to adapt, but by nature, there's some guesswork in there, and sometimes it looks really bad when they're not in the same place.
On the Mizzou defense, how much of a mess is it? And any thoughts on the longevity of the defensive coordinator?
That's a good question. I do think this, and disabuse me of this if you disagree, but the game that it troubled me early really was that Kentucky game. It felt like they were overmatched, physically overmatched by a team that was going to be 6th, 7th, 8th most talented team they're going to play this year. That might be unfair to Kentucky. Maybe Kentucky's better than that. Yeah. But I just remember thinking that in some ways they just might not have the horses right now. And then if you compound that with issues where you don't feel like they're getting on the same page and you don't have the right personnel, that's pretty tough. So I think that I think if there's more really embarrassing situations on defense this season, I guess we've already seen that Drinkwitz isn't averse to making changes. I have no idea whether that means Steve Wilkes' job is in danger during the season, but y'all know better than I do. This is a show me state, and they got to find a way to demonstrate they're getting better. I mean, you can play better and still lose a game and still get beaten on any play, but still play better. I think we all recognize that difference, but I think we want to see that there's some combination of motivation and innovation that's going into these games.
Speaking of show me state, the next question: Mizzou's attendance for homecoming was right at 47,000. There were enough people in town with bars charging $40 cover charges and folks standing 8 deep at the parade to get 67,000 people at the game. Is this the new post-pandemic normal, or will fans return when the team is winning?
I think it's a little bit of all of that. I don't know how you guys have all felt during the pandemic, but I think we all kind of realized we could see a game pretty well on TV. And maybe, save 7 hours of travel. So that comes up. In this case, though, the point is that the people are in town, and maybe the perceived entertainment value was more at the parade and downtown than against North Texas. Be an interesting question. I think, you always wonder is if you feel like it's a game, not particularly enticing opponent but that your squad is going to win. Is that more attractive than playing, Alabama on homecoming? I don't know. Would more people have gone to an Alabama game? Well, I guess it would have been more full. You probably would have had some Alabama fans, probably a nice core of them. The attendance thing has been a thing for a long time, though, hasn't it? And it's funny. I remember when I first started at the Post-Dispatch, it was really hard times for Missouri football. I remember being impressed that 35 to 40,000 people were coming to the games when they weren't winning. And then, through the Pinkel era, I don't know what the peak attendance years would have been, but boy, did that place look nice when it was packed. But I think somebody can tell me if I'm wrong about this, that the pattern has been really since 2015 and, all the uproar that I think had people angry on multiple sides of the fence of how they perceived what was going on in Columbia. I think it's been hard to get people back. And I get that there's chicken and egg here, and there's certainly an appeal to try to make it, get people to come to sort of prime the pump and help get things going. On the other hand, you want to go, know you're going to enjoy the game, feel like you've got a winner there. Just a quick side point. I did have a chance to meet Desiree, the new athletic director, a few weeks ago. Very impressed with her. And I think of that right now because I know that, of course, they put out some surveys. right away after that first game, and as I understand it, acted upon some things people suggested about the game atmosphere. And when I talked to her a little bit about that, one of the points she made is that we need to control what we can control about the enjoyability of the experience, and we need to be responsive to our constituents and give you reason to come. And I think that's the right attitude. And hopefully the football team itself will give you more reason to come.
Trying to get all the questions in, Vahe, so I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to jump around a little, do a different topic. What are your thoughts on the John Gruden situation? Will this bring about more investigative reporting on past emails of others in sports?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was pretty appalling to read that stuff. I saw the headlines and didn't quite know what to expect, and really my eyes kind of popped. I mean, it's misogyny, racism, homophobia, all lumped together. And I don't know, it comes out of this very particular situation with Washington. I suppose it was something like 600,000 emails I thought I read that people were going through. I suppose there could be some other things that implicate other people. My friend and colleague Nancy Armour at USA Today wrote something making the point that this speaks to a broader problem. I won't try to paraphrase Nancy here, but I found her points interesting and worth recommending to read.
Back to Mizzou football, Connor Bazelak has been an above-average quarterback. One knock, though, has been throwing the ball downfield. Does he have to do that for the team to win more games?
I don't know. It's funny, I've certainly seen, I guess I've heard people complain about how patient he is. And it's kind of funny. His game seems to mirror what I know of his personality, right? He's very low key. And I think people might want to see more emotion out of him and more pizzazz out of the play. I like watching him play. And I guess it's a thin line between taking what the defense gives you and trying to, force the issue. And that seems to be his temperament and his game. But I still think he's pretty good. And, maybe somebody can supplant him. I'm not quite sure what's coming up behind him. I know there was probably some sentiment for some of his backups after their performances a few weeks ago, but I don't know that he has to go downfield. I think like anything else, you have to be able to demonstrate you could and break it up a little bit.
Isn't a downtown baseball stadium tied to the availability of public transit, like light rail or streetcar? What do you think?
I don't know that, but we do know that here we are right in the middle of this major expansion, which of course, if you guys want to come meet up on Main Street, we'll see you in a couple hours.
No, thanks. Not this week.
It's and I guess it's going to be that way for a while. I mean, I'm eager to see the finished result, just as I'm eager to see the finished result at the airport. I know maybe the St. Louis is a taboo term on here, but I do wish there were a way to have something here that St. Louis has, which is that Metrolink to the airport. And the Metrolink really was resisted there and became, I think, a great thing. I know there's different reasons here why that hasn't gone through. And if the question is about this, I may have misunderstood the question, but I do wonder if we're talking about, my impression is that the idea of a downtown stadium is likely to be somewhere over east of City Hall, maybe on over towards where the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is, somewhere in there. I don't have a firm notion of even what that space is that would be available. But if the question's related to that, would that mean possibly linking some east-west, another form of public transportation east-west? Maybe that stimulates that. Although hopefully it'd be kind of walkable from the core downtown too.
You know, my editorial comment, I've been to 20 some ballparks and I'm a big proponent of downtown. I love the K, but there's just nothing quite like downtown, the activity around it. So that's my editorial comment. And I don't care if anybody, people probably don't care what I think. So that's okay.
Well, another thing though, this is a little bit of a cautionary tale. I think it worked out ultimately. I mean, again, sorry for the St. Louisitis, but when they were proposing the new Busch Stadium, part of the big pitch was, well, we're going to build a ballpark village around it. I mean, that's going to drive it. Well, you may or may not know that they built the stadium and ballpark village was a huge puddle for a few years, and it really soured a lot of people on the approach that was taken, and ultimately got built. And I think it's been a good thing. But I do think as people assess how to do this, that I hope whatever's going to be developed around the ballpark is sort of part and parcel of it from the start.
But in fairness, if I remember, the stadium opened in 06, correct?
Yeah.
And we went into the Great Recession shortly thereafter. And that delayed things.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think it reflected a tail wagging the dog idea. I think there's a big pitch that it's all about ballpark village and, oh, we're going to have a stadium. And, that it wasn't quite it. But you're right. Your point's well taken, Mark.
Well, hey, we're going to wrap up. I just want to ask you, you've had some really interesting columns lately about Jason Sudeikis as high school coach and inspiration for Ted Lasso, and then also the one on Bob Kendrick and Buck O'Neill, and hopefully we get Buck in the Hall of Fame now. Any other projects of interest that are coming up we can look forward to reading?
I feel like I would just jinx them if I brought them up, because they're not fully formed concepts or ideas. But I've made a couple trips that I got some stuff in the notebook for. One I'll say is I did go to Brett Veach's hometown in the middle of Central PA, the Chiefs general manager. Maybe when the Chiefs have a little uptick, that'll be a better received thing to work on. But it was kind of neat to see, Pennsylvania coal country and where he comes from. And I got to learn a lot about him I didn't know. So, one of the things I'll just blather on about this, it has been a fundamental change in our jobs the last year and a half with COVID. And one of the real challenges is harder to take people where they don't get to go. And I've always thought that was a really a great aspect of the job, right? A great thing to strive to do. And sort of the privilege of the job is to, we're in the locker room, we're talking to the people, we know people. So we got to find ways to keep our imaginations going and our resourcefulness at hand, because Zoom calls with 3 people that 90 reporters are on doesn't really give you anything different than you're going to get if you're checking in on it. So that's the challenge. And of course, we hope we can keep meeting the challenge.
Well, hey, thank you. As I always say, Kansas City is blessed to have had a long history of great sports columnists, and you're one of the best. And we really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, it's great to be with you guys. And as I tell you often, even when I didn't live here, it was great to visit with you guys, and all the more fun to see you so regularly here. So thanks a million for having me, and we'll talk soon.
This is one of our biggest number of viewers we've had this year, so we knew you'd have all the answers, and you start on the defensive front at least.
I think I just asked more questions and gave answers, but I do what I can.
All right, thanks, Vahe. Hey,
Okay,
folks,
guys.
thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget, next week, head men's basketball coach Conzo Martin will be our guest, and in 2 weeks, head women's coach Robin Pinchton. Don't forget to go to kctigerclub.com to find more information as we eventually sometime hope to be meeting in person again. We'll keep you posted on that. And of course, follow us on Twitter at KC Tiger Club. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you with Conzo Martin 1 week from today.